I, Manmohan Singh, do swear in the name of God that I will faithfully and conscientiously discharge my duties as Prime Minister for the Union. I honestly believe that history will be kinder to me than the contemporary media or the art.
Prime Minister Narendra Modi led the nation in paying tributes to former Prime Minister Dr. Manmohan Singh, who passed away at the age of 92 late last night. Dr. Manmohan Singh's legacy, his contribution to India's economy and shaping India's foreign policy at a very critical juncture remain our top focus story on this special broadcast. The India-US civil nuclear deal, for example, that cemented India-US ties. The India-Japan relationship, attempts to improve India's relationship with China. Now that is spoken of quite extensively. Of course, experts do say that his policy towards Pakistan, especially after 26/11 Mumbai terror attacks, could have been and should have been even stronger. We debate. I'm Gaurav Sawant, as always. The India-US civil nuclear deal, India's relationship with Japan, from a deep distrust to strategic partnership, attempting to improve ties with China, forging closer bonds with countries like Bangladesh, Bhutan, Maldives. There were multiple high points in Dr. Manmohan Singh's foreign policy. Though the India-Pakistan relationship remained a huge challenge, especially after 26/11 Mumbai terror attacks and the disaster at Sharm el-Sheikh with that agreement. Dr. Singh also sought to improve ties with China between 2006 and 2013. In 2013, that border defense cooperation agreement was inked in Beijing. Let's take a look at some of the highs and lows of Dr. Manmohan Singh's foreign policy.
Except as may be required for the due discharge of my duties as Prime Minister.
Dr. Manmohan Singh, sworn in as India's 14th Prime Minister on 22nd May 2004. Called as the accidental Prime Minister, he was chosen for the role by Congress chief Sonia Gandhi and went on to serve 2 terms till 2014. During Dr. Singh's first term as the Prime Minister, the world's biggest jobs guarantee scheme, the MNREGA, and the Right to Information Act were rolled out in 2005. On the issue of national security, however, while Manmohan Singh explored the peace process with Pakistan and Hurriyat groups on Jammu Kashmir, but his efforts suffered a major setback after Pakistan-sponsored terror attack hit Mumbai in 2008. The biggest highlight of Manmohan Singh's first tenure and also the biggest test of UPA coalition government was the India-US nuclear agreement.
The relationship is the India-US civilian nuclear agreement.
The deal would allow India to cooperate with America on a civilian nuclear program. But the left front resisted the deal, eventually withdrawing outside support.
Enormous pressure on your time.
Despite high stakes for the government and his chair, Dr. Singh led the negotiations with America. This overcame the hesitation of history, as he famously said at the summit in Washington in 2005. The tough stance that Dr. Singh took on the nuclear deal and for steering the country through the 2008 economic recession, UPA was rewarded in the next general elections, especially by the middle class in 2009.
I will bear true faith and allegiance to the Constitution of India.
The Manmohan Singh-led Congress party won 206 seats in the 2009 Lok Sabha election, increasing its 2004 tally by 61 seats. But the UPA 2 years were hit by policy paralysis.
Where is the Prime Minister to bring in? Where is the Prime Minister?
Battling the taint of financial scandals and corruption charges against his ministers, from the 2010 Commonwealth Games to the 2G, Adarsh and the coal block allocation. Opposition's escalated charge that Manmohan Singh was simply a puppet prime minister while the real decision maker was Sonia Gandhi was an accusation that Dr. Singh could not break free from.
I honestly believe that history will be kinder to me than the contemporary media or for that matter, the opposition parties in parliament. I think, taking into account the circumstances and the compulsions of a coalition polity, I have done as best as I could do under the circumstance.
A young boy who bore the scars of partition, but went on to become a reputed financial scholar on his merit, leading a modern nation through sheer merit and determination. A man of few words, but a leader with vision for India. Bureau Report, India Today.
Several analysts have described the 2008 India-US Civil Nuclear Agreement as a game changer. A game changer that cemented the India-US ties and paved the way for closer cooperation, deeper cooperation in defense, trade and technology. However, the 2010 nuclear liability laws that discouraged US companies from participating in the nuclear sector. The relationship, of course, also nosedived after the Devyani Khobragade strip search episode. But consider the India-Japan ties, they soared. Except Pakistan and China, relationship in the close neighborhood too improved. Pakistan, of course, remained his Achilles heel. I'm joined to talk more about Dr. Manmohan Singh's legacy by Ambassador Vivek Karju, former Secretary in the Ministry of External Affairs, former Ambassador to Kabul. Sushant Sareen is a Senior Fellow at the Observer Research Foundation. Before I come to our guests, let's quickly listen in to Dr. Manmohan Singh on the Civil Nuclear Agreement.
I would like to assure this august House and through this House the people of India that every single decision, every policy initiative we have taken was taken in the fullest confidence that we are doing so in the best interests of our people and our country.
Ambassador Karju, Dr. Manmohan Singh himself described the Civil Nuclear Agreement as the best moment of his tenure as Prime Minister between 2004 and 2009. Was that his biggest achievement on foreign policy?
It was a very significant moment in our foreign policy because if you recollect from 1974, gradually the screws were tightened on India in terms of high technology transfer. And through the civil nuclear deal, which Dr. Manmohan Singh steered so ably, we were able to begin and move rapidly ahead on the process of dismantling that denial process. So there is no doubt in my mind that that nuclear deal was a great foreign policy achievement, and it showed a certain foresight in Dr. Singh, who was undoubtedly a remarkable intellectual, in understanding India's priorities at the time when he became Prime Minister.
The relationship, Sushant Sareen, between India and the US post-Kargil, the interactions between Jaswant Singh, Strobe Talbot, the interactions between then Prime Minister Atal Bihari Vajpayee and Bill Clinton, the relationship was on an upswing. But was the civil nuclear deal a game changer?
Clearly it was, Gaurav, because see, that kind of two things inspired confidence in India as far as the United States was concerned. First one was, of course, Kargil. The role that the Americans finally played. Initially, during Kargil, the Americans leaned on us to go easy on the Pakistani infiltration. But then the boot turned, on the other foot when Mr. Vajpayee dug in his heels. But the second was the civil nuclear deal. And I think that completely transformed the state of relationship, the kind of defense agreements that we've entered into, the kind of foundational agreements that we've entered into, I think can all be traced back to that civil nuclear deal and the confidence that was built between India and the United States as a part of that deal. And to Dr. Manmohan Singh's credit, he was willing to stake his government on that particular deal. He did not consider the civil liability deal that important or that pivotal to stake his government on it. But as far as the civil nuclear deal was concerned, he was willing to stake the government on it. And whatever they had to do to save the government and get the deal through, they did. So I think that will remain his crowning achievement as far as foreign policy is concerned.
And Ambassador Kaju, this agreement then, as Sushant Sareen was also pointing out, paved the way for closer cooperation in defense, trade and technology. Some have described it as a watershed moment between India and the United States of America. But 2010, things started changing. Then that Devyani Khobragade incident. So if it was truly a game changer, why wasn't it taken to its logical conclusion? Or were political compulsions too much within the country?
Once the process begins, it doesn't mean that there won't be hiccups on the way. The Devyani episode was a diplomatic episode. It outraged the nation because a lady officer was involved, and I think the Americans behaved atrociously with her. But in the larger scheme of things, when you look at relations between nations, such episodes, howsoever hurtful they may be, have to be put in a perspective. I think the important thing is that there was the development of mutual confidence in India, between India and the United States after the nuclear deal. And also remember, and this is important, that had it not been for the personal involvement of the American president,
Yes.
I doubt whether India would have got the exemption from the nuclear suppliers group. And that came because at that stage, the Americans were conscious that Dr. Manmohan Singh was leading India onto a path where there would develop a coincidence of interest between them and us, among other things, in the matter relating to China. By the middle of the first decade of this century, it was quite clear to the Americans and to the rest of the world that the emergence of China was unprecedented and unanticipated. It is ironic that the Americans contributed fully to that emergence, but
Yes.
such things happen. So at that stage, they realized that India, if it decided to pursue a certain path, which under Dr. Manmohan Singh it began to, and then that process was carried forward when Prime Minister, when Mr. Narendra Modi took over as Prime Minister. We've seen the fruition of those efforts, beginning with the Jaswant Singh stroke Talbot talks.
Yes.
And Sushant has rightly mentioned the Kargil war and how India responded to the Kargil war. Though that journey is now really bearing fruition. I'll just say one more word. The real thing that India had to show in Kargil, and people forget this, was that we were a responsible state possessing nuclear weapons.
Yes.
That if we had made a mistake, and there was a mistake, there was an intelligence gap, to use a word, which led to certain consequences that were very deleterious on the security of our northern borders. Then India had to pay a price, and we paid that terrible price.
And
both
a
in
terrible
blood
price.
and treasure.
Absolutely.
We paid a horrible price. But as a responsible state, as a big state, we paid that price. On the other hand, the Pakistanis were shown to be totally adventurous.
and
totally
reckless.
non-responsible with the
Yes.
Kargil action. So the
So
Kargil
since you mentioned China, let me quickly jump to China. Because another high, Sushant Sareen, had been India's ties with Japan from a deep distrust to a strategic partnership again during Dr. Manmohan Singh's times, which was often described as the crowning glory of India's then Look East policy. But how would you assess his attempts to improve ties with China? Nathulat Pass trade in 2006, the Border Defense Cooperation Agreement in 2013, the 3 agreements on sister cities, Delhi, Beijing, Kolkata, Kunming, or was China leading us up the garden path even in 2013?
So I think, Gaurav, to my mind, China has been a bit of a blind spot, not just for the Americans who allowed the rise of China, but also for the Indians who have always deluded themselves on, the Chinese intentions vis-a-vis the subcontinent and vis-a-vis India in particular. And very often, and I'm sure Mr. Karju will probably go after me on this one. But we've entered into agreements with China. If you look at the kind of border agreements that we've entered into with China, frankly speaking, if I was somebody who's a lawyer trying to draw up contracts, these are the worst kind of contracts I can ever draw up. And despite the fact that many of those agreements, the Chinese were literally taking right to the edge, we continue
Okay.
to enter new agreements and then tom-tomming that these are very successful ones. We did
And
not
even
need.
now, there's a reference to the 2005 agreement, again during Dr. Manmohan Singh's times, apart from, of course, the 2013 BDCA. But, since I'm now short on time and I want to touch on Pakistan before we take a break, Ambassador Karju, your assessment of 2005 agreement, 2013 agreement, his attempts to improve ties with China.
I think Dr. Singh was sincere when he thought that China and India had enough space to grow. That is what he said. But I doubt whether our China's experts really understood China fully, or if they did, the question I've always had in my mind was, were they buying time? Let's not forget that the 1990s were very difficult economic years for us.
Yes.
And we needed to devote all our resources to the transformation of the economy. And very often when diplomats and political leaders discuss agreements, they realize the shortcomings in that agreement, but they've got to balance the full national situation with a particular agreement.
So making the
I
best
think
of the
when,
worst at that point of time. I want to quickly touch on Pakistan because was that his Achilles heel? And Ambassador Karju, you first, not responding to Pakistan with force post 2611, the disaster of the agreement. Sushant Sareen speaks of China. I want to talk about Sharm el-Sheikh and the reference to Balochistan. Could there be a bigger disaster when it comes to India-Pakistan relationship where a victim of terror is equated with the perpetrator of terror?
well, Gaurav, I was present in Sharm el-Sheikh, though I had nothing to do with India-Pakistan ties at the moment. And I must confess, when I saw the paper that had emerged from the Dr. Manmohan Singh's meeting with Gilani, I turned it upside down and inside out, trying to make sense of it. And I won't name a colleague, but he is now holding a very senior position, who was with me. So he looked at me, he said, "What are you doing?" So I said, I have a little experience of dealing with Pakistan. I'm trying to make a sense of what we've agreed upon. Dr. Manmohan Singh's view was that we have nothing to hide. Now, that is a view. It's an academic view. I respect that view as an academic, but as a professional diplomat and as someone who had dealt with Pakistan, I thought that agreement could have been better worded. And I dare say some of the diplomats who were involved in drafting that agreement themselves admitted to it, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
to the draftsmanship of that agreement. But on Pakistan, I'll just say one word when it comes to Dr. Singh. I think there was a wistful sense of nostalgia, even though there was a hard core when he understood that what Pakistan was, but there was also this nostalgic feeling, uh, you know, of what the subcontinent was. You can have breakfast in Kabul and lunch in Lahore and then dinner
And
in
dinner in
Delhi
Delhi.
over to this effect. The unification. Now, academically, it's a very sound idea. But what it overlooked, and that was something that always surprised me,
Yes.
was the foundational principle of Pakistan.
Absolutely.
I don't know what
Based on India
Sushant will look
hatred.
at it, but I have always been conscious that whenever we deal with Pakistan, we should never forget its foundational principle.
And
That is a
Sushant Sareen,
stumbling block beyond all stumbling blocks.
absolutely. Sushant Sareen was dealing with Pakistan, perhaps his Achilles heel, the Achilles heel of his foreign policy, historic opportunity to punish Pak terror, post 26/11 Mumbai terror attacks lost.
So, Gaurav, I will deal with his dealing with Pakistan in two ways. One is that there was this, of course, this refugee hangover that many Indians have, this nostalgia for an undivided India that people of that generation had. But that aside, I think there was also a certain amount of naivety in understanding the enemy, not just with China, even more with Pakistan. So, for example, from 2004 to 2008, there was this dialogue going on between India and Pakistan on the back channel. Apparently,
Yes.
some progress was made. I have a lot of reservations on whatever progress is claimed to have been made. But what is important is that around that time, he was ready to enter into a deal on Siachen.
On Siachen,
And
yeah.
this kind of a deal would have been disastrous for us had we gone into it. Thank God for General J.J. Singh and others who prevented us going down that road. And incidentally, people from Ambassador Karju's Biradari were plugging for that particular deal, which tells us a
Don't
lot.
blame me. I had nothing to do with it.
I said your Biradari, sir. I didn't say you. Uh, but the fact is that that naivety is
Okay.
there even in the Indian Foreign Office, trying to please the
Yes.
boss and give him what he wants. So one was that. The second was post 26/11. Now on that, I wish we had retaliated, but perhaps the Prime Minister of the time knew better of the kind of consequences and the kind of escalation spiral we might have entered into, and decided that there were other ways of dealing with it. I might have
Op.
problems with his not retaliating and punishing
Yes.
Pakistan. But then what did we do? 1 year later, we did Sharm el Sheikh. And then we
Yes.
started the puppy jappi diplomacy in a somewhat understated manner post that.
You
So,
know, which is
the
where Balakot in 2019 was perhaps the absolute game changer. I'm sorry, gentlemen, I've run out of time and there's so much to talk about
Just
on his foreign
one
policy.
word.
One word,
One
sir.
word.
One word.
He was
Go on, sir.
never naive. There were deliberate choices that he made.
Okay, not naive, deliberate choices. And that is something that we will continue to discuss and debate. Gentlemen, for joining me here on this India Today special broadcast, many thanks.